a decision is expected imminently, could be as early as tomorrow, on whether the Chinese telecoms giant Huawei is going to be given the green light by the UK government to access parts of our 5G network, the new high-speed data sharing network that we're going to all be having access to in the coming years. The issue has been raised at that meeting between the Chancellor Sajid Javid and the US Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin at the weekend. And the US has previously warned, that continues to make headlines today, warning the UK government, saying it would be madness to use Huawei's technology on the 5G network here. Security concerns, top of the list of worries there. And we've got Emily Taylor with us, who's an Associate Fellow at Chatham House, editor of the Journal of Cyber Policy as well. Morning to you, Emily.
Morning, Sean.
Would it be madness?
I don't think so, but it certainly has become a very fraught decision. People are almost fetishising Huawei in this, but it's easy to forget that most of the household names who provide our equipment have some aspect of their production based in China, such as Apple or Amazon Alexa, Fitbits, and so on. However, so there are many aspects at play. You've got the national security concerns, pressure from the United States just at the point when we're leaving the European Union. Meanwhile, the intelligence services, who you would expect to be the first people to be quite cautious on this, have repeatedly been quite confident that this is a risk that can be managed.
That's what I'm interested in, because that's the line the Financial Times has gone in today, that Sir Andrew Parker, head of MI5 and GCHQ, saying we can manage this risk. And yet Dominic Lawson in the Mail, in his column, son of former Chancellor, is pointing out that the chairwoman of Huawei used to work for the Ministry of State Security, and there's a law in China that says all organisations and citizens have to work with Chinese National Intelligence Agency.
Yes, indeed, and we have similar laws here. And those laws have been pointed to. The Chinese state, of course, is a very different being to Western democratic states. So the consequences of data sharing with the Chinese state are much more severe, for example, for dissidents or human rights activists and others who oppose the state's objectives. And this is a real driver of concerns, but there are also economic drivers as well. Although the US has been very vocal in its opposition to Huawei, and Australia has had a ban, these are outliers as states. Almost every other country is using Huawei in some way, shape or form. And while we're all expecting this long-awaited decision this week, 5G trials have already happened, and 5G is being offered to customers in the United Kingdom, and Huawei is a part of those offerings already.
One thing I saw, Emily, in sort of the back and forth in the media of comment between the UK and the US was some suggestion at some point, maybe it would come from Donald Trump, that why doesn't, if there are even risks that need to be managed, why doesn't the UK and the US, for example, just get together and form their own version of Huawei that can build this infrastructure?
Yes, I think that this is definitely the way forward. But it's a bit like planting an oak tree. The best time to have started that is some time ago. But the next best time is, of course, now. Vietnam over the weekend unveiled its own homegrown provider of 5G. But you can't just sort of create one overnight. That takes years.
Does it mean we're behind the times with that then?
Well, the market for providing 5G infrastructure has become incredibly concentrated, as actually many aspects of the IT market have. And it hasn't been an amazingly brilliant two decades for telecoms operators. They've had to face down the threat of internet providers who appear to provide their services for free and yet hungrily use all the infrastructure that the telcos have to pay to put into the ground. So a lot of our telcos have enormous debt, and at this moment they would naturally be attracted to a provider that is lower cost. Vodafone has been investing quite heavily in startups that use open protocols such as Open RAN. Examples are like Lime Microsystems in the United Kingdom or American firms like Open Parallel. And these would help reduce the cost of providing services, but it does take time and they're not ready yet to go global.
How important is this decision for how the UK is seen globally and its trading relationship with the US? Do you think the sort of potential fudge is Huawei, yes, but only on the periphery, will appease the Americans? And what will other nations view it? How other nations will view that decision?
Well, the US repeatedly is raising the stakes for this decision. Most of Mike Pompeo did a tour sort of last year where he was carrying sort of threatening messages to the rest of the European Union. Germany turned around and went, well, we're not making any restrictions. So I think the European Union former partners, as it will be at the end of the week, will probably be unfazed by this. But of course, so much hangs for the UK on its continuing close relationship with the United States, not just on trade, but as a member of the Five Eyes partnership. And one of the most worrying aspects for me is that the US seem to be putting that on the line as part of what would normally be a fairly low-key technical decision of which providers you use for your telecoms infrastructure. Bear in mind, Huawei has been in this country for 15 years already.
So just to clarify, essentially, the Five Eyes is intelligence sharing, and
Yes.
and America saying we won't intelligence share with you if you use Huawei infrastructure.
Yes, that's the threat. So you have people like Mike Pompeo and, of course, the president himself making that threat. Meanwhile, you have Sir Andrew Parker saying, oh, it'll be fine, we'll carry on as before. And Steve Mnuchin at Chatham House this weekend, when he was asked about 5G, he seemed to really downplay that threat. So mixed signals, really.
Very mixed signals, ironically, as we're trying to clarify our communications situation. Emily Taylor, thank you. Associate Fellow at Chatham House, Editor of the Journal of Cyber Policy as well.